Okay, let's begin. A round of applause for our guest here. I would like to first ask the Ambassador of Israel to say a word because there's quite a good chance that Ukraine will follow in Israel's footsteps regarding IT sector development. And here, please, Ambassador.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a great pleasure to be here with you today. This is a very important event, and I would like to thank the organizers here for providing me with this opportunity to address you. I'm unfortunately not a businessman nor an expert on investment, but what I would like to do here in my very brief address is perhaps to share with you some of the Israeli experience on some topics that might be relevant for Ukraine today. Now, investment is, of course, very important. And this reminds me of a course, an MBA course I once took in the US, in which one of the professors told us, if you are interested in money, ask for advice. If you are going to ask for money, you are going to get an advice. So this actually leads me to the next thought that what is very important, perhaps even more than investment, is the mindset. And it happened to me many times when I travel here in Ukraine, and every time I go to a place, I meet the mayor, the governor, and I always have questions about how do we bring Israeli investors here. And this is indeed a very important question, but also you've got to have the right mindset to get the investors. And in Israel, one of the characteristics of Israel that perhaps some of you know is the fact that we do not have natural resources, or almost no natural resources. And our main resource is the people. Now, it sounds nice, people as a resource, but what does it really mean? And what it actually means is that people are the generator of wealth for the country, for the state. So how do you turn people into generators of wealth? You invest in them. You invest predominantly into the education system. And we are very lucky that the founders of our state understood this. And from the very early days of Israel, the education system have become extremely important. Now, it doesn't mean that we solved all our problems. We still have many challenges in the education system. But one of the issues that we reached a certain level of achievement is identification and promotion of gifted kids. Now, the previous panel dealt with education, perhaps from a different angle. But education is indeed very important, and in Israel we see it as, again, as a wealth generator. And the gifted children that are being identified during the first or second years of elementary school, later, throughout their education, get special curriculum, get special programs. We don't create special schools for gifted children in order not to create some kind of a social gap or create some sort of elite. They study within the educational system, but they are constantly challenged and motivated to explore, to ask questions, to look for different solutions to problems. And at the end of the educational process, as probably most of you know, we have the army. And the army in Israel also serves as a kind of an educational institution. And many of these, they're not kids anymore, they're young people, they go into the army. And they serve in special units that are aimed to predict and prepare for the battlefield of the future. And the battlefield of the future is going to be very, very high on technology. We are here in Ukraine, we are already very well familiar with the term hybrid war. And the battlefield of the future is going to consist of different types of warfare, cyber warfare, high technological warfare, etc., etc. And when these young people, when they leave the army with a lot of very intensive, very high-level knowledge that enable them to become the nucleus of the Israeli high-tech industry. And these people are really become role models. And in Israeli schools, the kids, they don't only aspire to be Messi or Ronaldo, but they also want to become these kinds of entrepreneurs who made it. And these are the people who really generate most of the wealth for our country. And I would like to conclude by saying that here in Ukraine, on no accounts you have less talented people in Israel. When I came here the first time, I was extremely impressed by the level of people, by some of your very good, very advanced educational institutions. And I think it's worthwhile to consider investing into a system that will turn these people into cash generators. Thank you very much for your patience, and good luck at the conference.
Okay, that was a good opening for our esteemed guest from Israel, Zeev Holtzman, chairman and founder of Giza Ventures. And Zeev was at the formation of the ecosystem in Israel, so we would be happy to hear a little bit about how that went.
Hi. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I just want to check. Yeah. Okay. First, I would like to thank Alex and for Empire State Capital for the invitation to come to this conference. For me, it's the first time in Ukraine, and I'm quite impressed on the high-tech sector, on the potential, on what I see. And I'm going to discuss in a few minutes, the next few minutes. I will start with some short description of Giza. Maybe after that, discussion of the Israeli venture capital development, not because I want to discuss the Israeli venture capital, because you have to look at it at the Ukrainian eyes, because anything that happened in Israel in the last 22 years, I believe can happen also in Ukraine, and definitely it should be some kind of a vision of a mark. So let's start. Giza. Giza was formed about 22 years ago, and one of the Israeli pioneer venture capital funds started actually when the Israeli venture capital industry started. We are focused on early stage companies, We are managing more than $600 million, 5 funds. Our investors are basically foreign investors, leading institutions from the US, Europe, and Asia. And we are focusing on all the main sectors active in Israel, basically the IT sector, the healthcare sector, and the digital IoT, etc., everything that is actually the most active sectors in the Israeli market. I would like to add that we are also have a partnership in 2 funds outside of Israel. One of them in Poland, GPV, established 4 years ago, which is doing very well, on Polish. And the second one is Spain, Swan Lab, a fund that already had the first closing, and we continue to be a $40–50 million fund. And we are discussing a possibility to cooperate with Alex, with Empire State Capital, maybe to establish a fund that will focus mainly on Ukrainian potential early-stage startup. Talking about Giza, about Israel, about performance, one of the main reasons at the end of the day to invest in venture capital funds, you want to make money. Performance is key, is crucial. And when it comes to performance, at the end of the day, investors usually are looking at these high-risk activities as something that can bring, also high return, high income. So just to give you one numbers, on our recent fund, Giza 5, IRR, 27% net to the investors, and also the other indications are one of the top 20 or 30%, even 10% compared to the US funds. Most of our investors are coming, as I said, from the US. So in order to bring money, we need to bring performance. Anyone that invests in Israel, compare us to the best funds, the top quartile funds in the US. It's a problem, but it's not all our funds made money. One of them is underwater, but most of them made money. And this is one of the best funds in the Israeli market. Talking about the Israeli VC track record, as I said, started in 1992. Only 1 Israeli VC funds exist. Again, I'm talking about Israel, but instead of Israel, maybe you should say Ukraine, 2016. And looking forward for the next 10 years, one of the problems, basically, generally speaking, one of the challenges, most of the development of the venture capital in all the countries around the world, including the United States, Israel, Taiwan, South Korea, started with a substantial incentive from the government. Unfortunately, the government, usually these plans related to the venture capital takes 10 years, 15 years actually to implement, but most of the politicians cannot look for more than 6 months, 1 year. So it's always a problem, when it comes to establish some incentive programs in Israel, in the world, regarding venture capital. Anyhow, these are some of the numbers. I don't want, to go over them. They are quite impressive numbers in the last 17 years. By the way, anyone that wants to get, a software copy of the presentation can get it, from Empire State. Just to give you a global comparison, a global view of the venture capital industry, of course, the United States is #1 by far. 2015, $60 billion was invested in the United States, by far the largest one. If you look, China is increasing substantially. China is becoming a major competitor, a major problem to all the venture capital activities outside of China. And it's going to grow, in a very high speed, going forward. You just see, that the rate of growth of the Chinese investment from 2014 to 2015 is almost 100%, a substantial amount of investment. Israel is relatively small, but when it comes to technology, basically Israel is second only to the Silicon Valley on technology-based type of startup or venture capital. If you look at the investment per capita, of course, the number in Israel are substantially higher compared to the US, and I didn't put the number on China. It's clear, that it's much larger. One of the advantages of Israel, and also maybe Ukraine should repeat it or should imitate it, if you look, at the investment, in the largest states in the United States, of course, Silicon Valley, California, $27 billion, almost 50% of total investment in US of the $60 billion goes to California. Israel is number 4, but I add, on the table on the side, the number of Israelis working on the high-tech industry outside of Israel in the Silicon Valley is between 80 to 100,000. This is a huge number. In New York City, it's more than 50 to 60,000 Israelis. Total employees in Israel is around $300,000. So, and almost the same number, or 70% of this number is outside. So working, with the ecosystem, especially in the US, there are many Ukrainians that live there, that you can cooperate with them, we should cooperate with them, and they can bring, the added value to the industry. Israeli VC at a glance, I'm not going to go over all the numbers, just to give you, on the last 3 lines, the number of R&D centers, which is key to the activities, in this industry. In Israel is huge, more than 300, number of incubators, and the total number of investment is going every year in the last 3 years. Last year, more than almost $4.5 billion, which is for a country like Israel is a huge, huge number. Also, if you look at the exits, in last year, more than $11 billion. Most of the exits in Israel are mergers and acquisitions. Some of them are IPO, initial public offerings. Most of the public offerings are in NASDAQ. So you see, that in the last year was a record year, and going forward, it looks that this year is going to be even better. The main ingredients of success and the critical mass of each one of them is really key, because it's not enough to have only a small part in each of them. I mentioned, what we consider to be, the main ingredients. I'm not going to go over all of it. Just to mention, 2 or 3 main items, the entrepreneurial culture, I'm going to discuss it. Having enough capital on all the ecosystem, on all the food chain, from early stage to late stage is key. And having, approved exit avenues, M&A or IPO, because at the end of the day, this is a business the investors want to make money, and you are being judged by making money. So this having, exit avenue is key to this success. I'm going to discuss a few items. Again, I am asking you to look at it at the eyes of Ukraine and to see what Ukraine should do in order really to make it successful in the next 10, 15 years. I mentioned also government support. In Israel, you have the Office of the Chief Scientist. Actually, the industry started with a program called Yuzma. I'm going to mention a similar program, that we propose to do also in Ukraine. But, the government should look at the venture capital on the high-tech as part of the infrastructure of the country. As utilities, as transportation, train, venture capital is the same. It's infrastructure. If you want to keep the young generation here in this country, you need to give them something, to think about it. Otherwise, the most capable people, the young people who leave the country will go outside. Europe, US, everyone, even to Israel. And we have some in Israel. What does it mean, culture, Israeli DNA? We mentioned some of the points that we believe create the whole ecosystem, which when we define entrepreneurship approach, attitude, DNA, we are talking about actually the Israelis challenging, questioning everything, strong drive, must-win attitude, knock on every door, not afraid, solution-driven approval for real problems. Israelis are not talking about theoretical problems. They are trying to be practical most of the time. Global thinking from inception. An early stage Israeli startup, when they start, they think about going global. Israel is a very small market, only 8 million people. Nothing, to sell in Israel on the high-tech. They have to compete outside. Asia, Europe, etc. And some of the description of the Israeli attitude is, I mentioned it here. Presence of multinational in the country is key. We have in Israel, actually, I mentioned the number before, almost any leading technology company that active out in the world is present in Israel. Presence in Israel, I'm not talking about selling its product, also selling its product, but I'm talking about R&D centers or some manufacturing activities. And in the last 3 years, I mentioned, many companies, mainly from China, from South Korea, from Japan, are becoming more and more active in Israel. Companies from US and Europe have been active all the time, from all the, as I said, from all the region, in all the sectors. Strong presence of multinational actually brings the added value, the market demands, the product demands, also some investment, some co-investment, some exit, and some capital. And this is when we are making an investment in a portfolio company, we usually make a reference. We call one of the leading companies, ask them what is their opinion, assuming that you had any specific product like we want to have. Would you buy it? Would you not buy it? Etc. So having this strong relationship, this strong presence in key, and hopefully, in Ukraine, more and more global technology companies will come and will establish themselves as R&D center in Ukraine. Just to show you, the level of activities on the performance, on the exit. As I said, at the end of the day, you need to make money. The presence of the large multinational, this is one of the main source of acquisitions, of mergers and acquisition. I list here some of the examples. Companies like Cisco bought, 12 Israeli companies. I'm talking about the last 10 years, more than $6 billion. And you have IBM, you have Google, you have Apple, you have eBay. Actually, any leading company in the world, this is just a list of the select list of the largest companies. So the presence of multinational is a combination of exits. Having the full ecosystem, the full food chain, investing in the companies, starting from incubators, from seed, from early stage, and going up to late stage is also crucial. We found from our experience that one of the problems in countries like Poland, Spain, which as said before, we have some partnership with domestic VC funds. We don't have enough co-investors, enough syndication. The risk is very high. Usually, one of the main operational principles of any venture capital fund is to have co-investment with other funds. So we want to see many funds coming, to Ukraine, domestic and international, and to have the possibility to invest from the beginning until the late stage. And usually you have different funds with different investment strategy. And if you have in each one of the categories, in the pre-seed, early stage, in the late stage, it's very important, it's key. And the relationship are basically some kind of competition. On one side, the competition from the best, most attractive investment opportunities. On the other side, let's cooperate. There is a lot of risk on the table. We can share it with all. We don't have to keep everything to ourselves. In Israel, you can see here the relationship. In the early stage, most of the investment is being done by Israeli VC funds. And in the late stage, on the right side, basically, this is the investment of foreign VC funds or largest VC, sometimes even private equity funds that are investing in the technology. Capital raised, we have to remember, that this is a cyclical business, and actually the level of activities depends on global activities. If you see here what happened, in year 2000 and year 2008, capital raised by Israeli VC funds, actually after a year went almost to zero because of the crisis. So people that are in this business have to have a look, a long-term look. Information is also key. Investors that are coming to a country, they want to know who are the major other venture capital funds, startups, key executives. If you have a website or someone that is actually in charge of doing it in Israel, we have IVC. which was established actually by us 17 years ago. Any investors that come to Israel can get, a full description, a full understanding of the industry. Last, our proposal, how, to initiate, actually to expedite the Ukrainian venture capital funds. We suggest, to have, a program after the Yozma program. Yozma is the Israeli initial program that started actually the industry in 1992, to call it initiative, to have an allocation of capital of $250 million from the government to create 10 new VC funds, existing or new VC funds, each one of them $50 million or more, with government incentive as an LP, no management rights, no participation in the venture of up to 50%, $25 million. Should be a partnership between domestic team and international team, because in order to bring, to bring the international expertise and added value, but to create, a domestic expertise. And the number of existing venture capital funds, I said before, co-investment syndication is key. There are some very active. On the right side, we have one. On the left side, the same one. But we need many more. But what's unique about this program is to give, the investors an option actually to buy back the government portion during a period of 7 years, plus interest, etc. As I said, this program has been established in Israel originally. After that, many countries around the world looked at it, and this has some adjustment, related to Ukraine. I believe, it can create, a quite an energetic sector. As I said in the beginning, politicians don't look for 10 years, 15 years. They look only for 6 months and 1 year. So the chances that this will be implemented is very small. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Zeev, for that presentation. I think that also, as Ambassador has noted, there's a lot of parallels, especially with fighting going on, and technology is likely the only thing that can balance brute force. So therefore, I think Ukraine will likely need to allocate a lot to the technology development. I would like to ask Andrey Kolodyuk, Chairman of UVCA, Ukrainian Venture Capital Association, to follow Zeev in this. Andrey has been very active recent years, pushing and spearheading the ecosystem. We ourselves are members of UVCA and very much support what he's doing, so I'd like him to give his vision.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank to our colleagues from Israel to say about this presentation, which, as he pointed out, the Ukrainians should learn more about it from our own eyes. And I'm going to share my experience, what I would focus based on the presentation, what we just heard from. And the second one is thank you very much for your proposal, because it's indeed needed. And to tell you the truth, I was in Israel first time in 2001 during the annual Venture Capital Association event, and I was amazed, like they've been sitting 600 people in the room, and they've been actually working on something that we already heard today about results. It was 15 years ago. It was pretty much just the beginning, and it's just amazing what the Israel could do for 15 years period of time. And for us in Ukraine, my message to you is the following. We can do the same, number one. We already have infrastructure, and I mean startups, 2,500 startups. In our association, we have 36 members, and many new players that already entered in the VC game and supported early age startups. So we are not in the, let's say, we're still in the early stage, but we already have an infrastructure in place. So this proposal is very useful in a sense to establish new funds, because we have many things similar with Israel. And you started in your presentation, so one of your key successful component was the immigration from ex-Soviet Union unions, engineers that flew to Israel. So meaning it is a talent. We are in the country that we have a talent. It's number one because we see money chasing talent, not opposite. Actually, we have some countries where it's opposite, when government actually pushing money into the system. We have an opposite. We have already startups, and it's very important. Yes, we have a low liquidity, but this means opportunity for VC funds, right? If you have a startup, that means an opportunity for VC funds, and meaning that your initiative to establish the fund in Ukraine is very welcome, because as you point out, it's very important to have a consolidation and the syndication between investors. Yes, in Ukraine, we already established such a culture, right? It's not only ventures funds that invite coincide investors. In this panel, we already have some joint investments with our colleagues, and we are developing this the same culture in Ukraine, and we are very welcome international funds to co-invest with us, because the other thing is very similar between Ukraine and Israel is that we have a local market, except e-commerce, meaning all our startups already positioned as the Israel ones to win the global race. It's very important because we already invest in the entrepreneurs that are brave enough to build something that can be competitive on the global scale. So it's number two, which is very similar between our countries. And number three, this is for the skeptics. This is for the skeptics about the Ukraine. And actually, I asked 2 years ago when we had a conference about Ukraine in San Francisco, and we had the same panel when some of the US funds were sitting in the panel, and I asked them, that was September 2014, and I asked them very straightforward the question, are you going to stop investing in Ukrainian startup because of the Russian invasion? And they said, no, why? We've been investing in the Israel for over 2 decades, and the war is not the obstacle. Unless you have a talent, we're going to continue invest in Israel and Ukraine, despite the war, despite the political situation. We don't care. We invest in the people. We're in the business of the people and talent. So, meaning, Israel have proved by last year by actually raising $11.7 billion of FDIs in the countries like where still have some military actions, because last September when we were in Tel Aviv, we've been sitting on the 39th floor in the Magma VC fund, and they've been telling us that they've been raising capital from Chinese investors, and the missiles were flying over their buildings that day. So it is possible, it's not the obstacle. And it is a message for the startups, it's a message for the government, it's a message for everyone. We can do it, and this is actually in our hands. Because, you know, in Ukraine, we're not longer relying on government, which is good for us, right? And honestly, there is only way to survive for us is to build the businesses, build the global businesses, is actually what's happening now, because some people call the startup as a fashion in Ukraine, and I disagree. It's not a fashion. It's an entrepreneurial spirit plus the engineering talent. They actually mix it together, and for everyone now is obvious. If you want to succeed in this country, it is possible to build the global companies, and this is what's happening. And next component, which very important for us Ukrainians to learn from, and you point out at your presentations that we have 50,000 Israelis working in the New York, right? In this, up to 100,000. Yeah, 100,000 in Silicon Valley. But guess what? We have Ukrainians living in New York and Silicon Valley all over the place. And what we need to learn about from the Israel ecosystem is a discipline and the networking, which we Ukrainians can learn from them. Okay? We can do the same once we grow up together and actually cooperate and collaborate and be in as a one network. And we have many initiatives like that because Israel just showed us that it's working. It's a working model. And speaking of the model, actually back in 2001, what we have learned, at least personally, as we've been trying to rebuild in Ukraine, is so-called Israel model, meaning that R&D, people, value creation stays in Israel or in Ukraine, but the businesses are built it global. It's very important for us because when skeptics says, yeah, Ukrainians will immigrate from Ukraine, I say, no. It's how our business is. You create something here, and then you need to relocate temporarily or build the sales offices in the US or in Europe, because otherwise you cannot build the global business. So what I'm telling you, we don't have to be afraid of Ukrainians that are brave enough to build the global businesses. So this is the 4 pillars. Of course, we have many more, and I like the name of your presentation which we should probably point out underneath of this conference, meaning the Israel-Ukrainian technology bridge, or we see ecosystem bridge, which is actually happening, and our practical advice for everyone is actually to make it happen in a practical sense, because we have all the components now in Ukraine to make it happen and to collaborate together. Thank you very much for your attention. We can do it.
Thank you, Andrey. Very good. Microphone working. I would like to now introduce a few existing and active venture and private equity funds that invest into IT sector. I'd please like to introduce Viktoria Tigipko. Thank you very much for coming. Founding partner of TA Ventures, and as I recall, one of very early trendsetters in this sector in Ukraine. Victoria?
Thank you everybody for coming, and I would like just to say a couple of words to support what we've heard from our speakers from Israel, because we do support the model of Israel, which was successfully implemented there. I would like to introduce our fund. TA Ventures is the $50 million US fund. The 50% of our funds are dedicated to Ukraine and the companies related to Ukraine. Another 50% is invested globally. The major focus is US and Europe, and also we are investing opportunistically in some other faraway destinations like Asia, Latin America, and also we have one investment in Israel. So we just started this year and would like to explore this opportunity more, because there are many interesting startups there. It's not easy to get to access to good startups. I can tell more about it after the panel for those who are interested. So we reached 18 exits to date, and our experience can be interesting for Ukrainian ecosystem, because we are happy to open doors and to teach Ukrainian startups how to work with the international network, which is crucial to build global companies out of Ukraine. Then we have a couple of social initiatives which are also super important for Ukraine as of today. One is Code Club Ukraine, which we started in 2013. It's education for kids, a totally volunteer non-profit project. We teach kids from 9 to 11 years all over the Ukraine under the programs developed by Massachusetts Technological Institute. It's not that easy to create that sort of programs. In gamification form, the kids learn how to code, Scratch, C++, Java, JavaScript, so other languages. And after 11 years, we also brought to Ukraine the Apps for Good program. It's a big international global movement for kids from 12 to 16. Where the kids can do apps for good, so charity apps. And these programs are also developed by the high quality specialists all over the world. And I think that might help a lot to improve the education for kids from 9 to 16 years. Currently we have already 100 clubs. Every week we are growing 5-7 clubs all over the Ukraine. Volunteers coming to teach them once per week for 1.5 hours. It's crucial for building the proper ecosystem in Ukraine. 1,500 kids have been educated to date, and in May we will start the national program asking for corporates, businesses, funds to join this program and to pick up the cities and regions of Ukraine and to support them with the coordinators, which doesn't cost much, like 10,000-15,000 hryvnia per month, and to supervise this project on a Ukrainian scale. Another project which we have, a social project which brings an intellectual movie to Ukraine. It's Odessa Film Festival. Also, I would like to invite everybody from 15 to 23 to come over there. And we have the special IT section there, which helps to grow Ukrainian movie art ecosystem. It's Digital Media Day, so a lot of interesting stuff will be there, how to go from offline to online, because these industry also needs disruption in Ukraine. So what I would like to add, there are a lot of challenges for Ukrainian ecosystem, a lot of challenges. I see the opportunities for Ukrainian developers and Ukrainian tech talents there, that we have the very good education. Majority of developers are self-educated, self-motivated and self-educated, so it's an interesting fact in Ukraine. Then we have in the industry more than 200,000 people active in that sector, and the figure is growing. The more than 2,500 outsourcing companies which learn and teach young developers and connected to the industry professionals. So that the interesting fact I would like to share with you, that every second startup, which we talk on a global scale, especially from US and Europe, work with the Ukrainian either freelancers or outsourcing companies, or with the Ukrainian tech talents, or they have them in their teams abroad. So you can imagine, and their feedback is quite positive. So it means that Ukrainians have a lot of talents. What we are lacking in Ukraine, we lack the entrepreneurial qualities, spirit, and we lack a lot sales qualities and marketing qualities. So these skills should be learned by our IT entrepreneurs, and they have to use all different opportunities, online and offline. So go to network abroad in different conferences, watch online courses, do whatever they can to talk to the specialists in order to improve these skills. Because to build a successful startup, these skills are really crucial. I'm talking about entrepreneurial skills, sales skills, and marketing. So tech talents, we have a lot. But we have to improve this entrepreneurial approach, which will bring us to another level on the global scale. So what we noticed being on the market from 2010, that our startups are quite close. They are not eager to share information, to disclose some figures, etc. So this totally different comparing to our conversations and Skype calls, which we regularly have, like from 3 to 5 every day with our team, talking to the international startups. So that's why this penetration into the global ecosystem is desperately needed for Ukrainian startups. So lack of liquidity, I would like to support the thesis of Andrey, that it's a big issue for Ukraine and how to manage this. So we have to bring the more positive PR of Ukraine globally. We have the vehicle, which we are the founding partners of, it's East-West Digital News, and I think we have to think over how to join forces on PR, the positive messages from Ukraine, because having that's a huge opportunity in terms of the tech talents in Ukraine, plus entrepreneurs who are eager to learn and to start the global projects. We have to do more in order to bring the positive feedback on Ukraine and the status as of today to the international medias. As an example, for example, one media which publishes the figures on the prices per tech talents in Ukraine can spoil the game a lot, because, for example, as of today, so Ukrainian tech specialists, they cost a bit more comparing to that of Belarus and Russia. So 2,000 per month average, comparing to 15 plus hundreds in Belarus and 17 plus 100 in Russia. But that's not the case. I mean, we have to prove that is on contrary different, and in order to save the opportunity for Ukrainian outsourcing industry to get more orders. The same with the Ukrainian startups. Yes, it's hard to attract capital. We understand that because of the current situation, a lot of funds have stopped financing Ukrainian startups, or they have we have to follow their rules to bring or to relocate the C-level management to US or to Europe. That's also the case. In order to get financing, we can do so. We have to learn and to talk and to work with the Ukrainian startups to help them how to, because they have no idea how to do that. And that's what we are doing, helping especially for the technological startups, which can relocate their forces, sales force and C-level management to US and to Europe, and to leave the IT team, CTO team currently in Ukraine. So I also agree with Andrey that we have to think over how to bring the story back. I mean, how to open the different opportunities for Ukrainian startups in order to, for them to work in Ukraine locally. But there are a lot to do. I mean, legislation in Ukraine doesn't exist to support the IT ecosystem, to support the venture capital movement, because you are not covered, you are not insured at all investing in Ukrainian vehicles and Ukrainian startups. I mean, there are a lot of cases and there are a lot of bad and unfortunate stories for Ukrainian ecosystem when they suffered of law enforcement. Only in 2015 we have more than 20 cases when government interfered and spoiled the reputation and the business of IT ecosystem. So that is no way should happen in the future. So legislation number one, the law enforcement number two, and the corruption level in Ukraine. So we have to work hard all together to be the examples ourselves, so how to do the business under the European and global rules. Because being on the 133rd place out of 160 in the world worldwide on the corruption level, it doesn't help much to build the proper IT ecosystem in Ukraine. But there is a good thing also. Ukraine is cheap in terms of the price of the living. So we are number 119, and that's rather cheap to start up businesses here, to bring the people here, and that is very attractive not only for the outsourcing industry, but also for the startups and the companies abroad from out of Ukraine to bring and start up their businesses here. So new practices arises in Ukraine when the CTO comes from US and they can establish the IT teams here in Ukraine and to start up an international businesses out of Ukraine. So this is a new wave which can be supported and should be supported by all of us. I'm not speaking about the government because I don't trust much, so it's better to rely on ourselves. That's the better approach. It will definitely work. So then we can share more ideas on which verticals might be the more attractive and interesting for Ukraine. It's first of all in tech verticals, which is super attractive for investors and for Ukraine, thanks to the tech talents which we have here. It's big data, it's SaaS, it's cloud computing, it's different platform and infrastructure solutions which can be startup in Ukraine and being global. And this is one of the major verticals where we are investing in second investments, not only in Ukraine but on a global scale. Then whatever is connected to the retail, it's still interesting for Ukraine. Different SaaS solutions which can help to scrape analyze data. We have good examples from Ukraine. Of course, the new trends in blockchain and Bitcoin. We have also a number of interesting examples in Ukraine which raised financing more than 60 million from international investors. Agro sector and agrotech, that's very interesting, including drones and other technologies. So there are a lot of interesting potential in Ukraine, but it's still a lot to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. I'd like to now ask Vasile Tofan, partner of Horizon Capital, a leading private equity firm here and also a fellow American company, American-run company. Please let us know about some of your investments into the tech sector that have been also recently done.
Yeah, if I may have the pointer, please. So I'm going to bore you with a lot of data. I thought what would be useful maybe is to share with you the way we talk to our investors. So maybe I'll start by giving you a brief snapshot of Horizon. Horizon is probably the largest and most established private equity fund in Ukraine, founded in roots going back to 1994. We have about 600 million under management. Traditionally investing in large companies, actually, traditionally our ticket has been starting at $15 million and up. What is interesting about Horizon is that while we started more of a brick and mortar fund investing in traditional businesses, milk companies, cheese companies, chocolate companies, I think the evolution in the profile of our investment actually mirrors the change in the Ukrainian economy, because if we look at the last 4 investments we did as a fund, all of them were in the IT space. So traditionally, when we speak to our investors abroad, they all see Ukraine as an agricultural company. So everybody knows that Ukraine is the number 1 black soil bank in the world, the number 1 grains, number 1 vegetable oil exporter in the world, number 2 grains exporter in the world, and so on. So one of the challenges we see at the moment is actually, complement and rebrand Ukraine as a country that doesn't have only the grains but has the brains too. So this is very much in line with the story that has been going so far in terms of positioning Ukraine more of as a tech nation as much as an agriculture nation. And I think we really have the numbers to be proud of. So when you look at Ukraine, what you see, and it is also the case for Russia or Belarus or other ex-Soviet countries, but Ukraine specifically, when you look at the educational system, it still preserves this legacy of bias towards math and sciences. So as a result, you still have this bias of young people to go and study, say, science as opposed to arts and literature and other things, which in turn, combined with the fact that the country still preserved a relatively strong higher education system. So if you look at the main scores for Ukrainian universities and higher education system, it scores relatively well compared to in what a difficult situation the economy is. So these 2 things combined, strong legacy of math and science at the primary school level, combined with good universities, leads to a relatively high supply of engineers each year. So just to put these numbers into context, so Ukraine produces 130,000 engineers per year compared to Poland, which has roughly the same population, and our neighbor, which produces about half that amount, or say Netherlands, that produces 10 times as little. And this large supply of engineers, of course, and many of them going and studying software engineering specifically, of course, leads to this lower, to an abundance of IT engineering supply and to relatively cost-competitive prices for those engineers. So say an Ukrainian engineer is 3 times or more than 3 times cheaper than a US engineer, or more than twice cheaper than an Israeli engineer. Indeed, as of lately, the cost of engineering has been increasing. I think we achieved the parity with the Polish level of engineers, or as Victoria was saying, actually are beyond Russia and Belarus in terms of the cost of the engineering force here. But nonetheless, this abundance of software engineers combined with relatively low prices has led to this very large industry of primarily IT outsourcing and independent IT freelancing. This is one of the data that actually it's most impressive to me. If you look at the Central Eastern European cities with the largest proportion of IT freelancers, if you look at the Elance or Odesk or such services, actually the four first cities in CEE are all Ukrainian based. So only on number 5th you have like a first Russian city showing up. Actually, nearly about a third of all IT freelancers in Central Eastern Europe are Ukraine based, and this number is like 5 times more than the Polish equivalent, again despite the similar population. So long story short, all this together has led to a fantastic growth story for the IT outsourcing primarily. So you see like the industry has grown about 25 times over the last 12 years, and this is the kind of statistics that actually capture investors' imagination when you tell them that, look, we've had an industry that in little over a decade expanded 25 times. This actually attracts their attention. This attracts their attention, and you get a chance to basically pitch your investment proposition, which I think we all agree it's not easy in the case of Ukraine, right?
Now, and again, just to put that number into context, because you may say, okay, Ukraine has been growing because the global IT outsourcing has been growing. Well, not really the case, because Ukraine IT outsourcing has been growing at more than four times actually, 4 times the rate of global IT outsourcing. So you can see, say, global IT outsourcing has grown 44% since 2007, and IT outsourcing has grown like 337% since 2007. So quite impressive numbers. Okay, I think the big question now is, will this growth in IT outsourcing will be followed by further growth in terms of Ukrainian IT ecosystem climbing up the value chain, repeating the Israeli story, because indeed IT outsourcing is a relatively low value add, low margin business. So can you move up the value chain? And it's a debate. If you ask me, I'm optimistic. I have to be optimistic. I mean, but a good parallel I see is the parallel with the OEMs. So where the ODMs, like the original equipment manufacturers in China. Think about a company like Asus. So now everybody knows the brand Asus because they do all these notebooks and smartphones and so on. But it's a company founded in the late 90s, actually. They started a sweatshop, literally a sweatshop, doing low-end assembly work for companies like Dell. So initially they were making this motherboard for Dell, maybe making 10 cents a motherboard. Then they moved to do the assembly for Dell computers, and they moved to manage the supply chain for Dell computers, up to the point when they started doing designs for Dell computers. And after that, they started promoting their own brand, and today ASUS is a multi-billion company selling their own branded products. Now the question is, can IT outsourcing move the same way as many, say, Chinese or Taiwanese OEMs have done in electronics? Our bet as Horizon Capital is that yes, because the most important thing that has been said by Andrey multiple times is the availability of talent, and the supply of talent and IT engineers in Ukraine is very, very large. And ultimately, it's a numbers game. You know, if you have and the numbers vary from 100,000 to 300,000 people working in software engineering in Ukraine, you know, maybe out of 100 that get bored of IT outsourcing and start on their own, like 95 will fail, but still because the numbers are so large, ultimately a select number of these companies will still succeed. And because the numbers are so large, the ultimate numbers of those companies that start on their own and launch own products as opposed to selling IT services will be quite significant. We already start seeing this. So say we as Horizon started by investing in a company like Cyclum, typical IT outsourcing. You know, we did well on this investment, and actually are very happy to have exited this investment in December last year to Soros Fund Management. Increasingly, though, we moved to other types of companies. So say another investment we did is Jubal. This time it's not IT outsourcing, it's actually a product company. Again, a company that out of Ukraine has built a business in 61 countries around the world, and it actually has been profitable from year one, and probably one of the most impressive IT companies in the Ukrainian ecosystem. Well, the last company we invested in is focused on the Ukrainian market. It's Rosetka. I hope everybody of you know. Please go and buy as much as you can from that site. It's a fantastic site, best prices, best service. So again, Rosetka is a product company focused on the Ukrainian market, taking advantage of the increase in internet penetration and the incidence of online shopping here in Ukraine. So just to end on a positive note, we're very excited about Ukraine as an IT destination. We believe in the thesis that increasingly the Ukrainian ecosystem will develop by moving from low-end IT outsourcing to higher value-add own IT products. It helps, as Viktoria has said, that the prices here are cheap. Actually, I have some numbers. You know, when we show these numbers to our US or European investors, you know that in Ukraine, the prices are comparable to Philippines, much better than Romania. At the level of Pakistan, they get excited. When you share them specific prices, that a beer costs like $1.7 and a burger costs like 1.5, they get ecstatic and they want to travel to Kyiv immediately. So and when you combine this with quite a cosmopolitan, exciting city, I mean, it's not a boring city to live in, right? It's an amazing city to live in. It's, I will excuse my guest from Israel here, but I think it's even like not less exciting than Tel Aviv or, any other big cosmopolitan city around the world. It's an exciting city and country to live in. So all this combined, basically, high supply of IT engineers, lots of IT engineers getting bored and trying to do things on their own, inevitably because the numbers are so high, many of these products becoming successful, low cost of living, cosmopolitan, exciting cities to live in. All this together creates quite an attractive recipe for future success, which we really, really hope for. Thank you.
Thanks. Now I'd like to hand it over to Yevgen Sysoyev, founding partner of A Ventures, recently one of very active funds here in Ukraine, also together with Mr. Kolodyuk, promoting the ecosystem.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me here. Probably we already feed you a lot of information, so I'll try to be short and give you a few anecdotal stories. So if you tried to do such panel 4 years ago, it would be not possible. You know why? Because 4.5 years ago, there were only 2 venture capital funds in Ukraine. That was TA Ventures and us. We made the thesis that we're going to invest only in Ukrainian startups going global. Everybody would laugh at us, even here in Ukraine. So everybody had doubts that it's possible to build up the value chain. Vasile been speaking, so everybody said, oh, it's outsourcing forever. And we've been, one of the first funds who took bets. Of course, we made a lot of mistakes, we made a lot of learnings, but overall, we still to look at the numbers, how much, first funds gonna make in terms of capital, because at the end of the day, in money management business, we have to make very good returns to our investors, and as you scale as a fund manager, it's all about returns. So at the end of the day, it's also about how much money we make. So 4.5 years ago, it was not possible. Now we have a panel. We have now probably 5 active venture capital funds in Ukraine. We now have 2 private equity funds which are active in Ukraine, investing in tech and betting on tech. And 5 years ago, these guys were betting on anything but not tech. So that's already a lot in terms of changes. Over the last 5 years, we also started building a bridge to Silicon Valley. I mean, I'm saying the Ukrainian ecosystem. So 5 years ago, if I would check in Bay Area, like nobody would write me. If I now check in, like, hey, I'm just right at San Francisco airport, I would get 20 messages in Facebook. Hey, I'm around. Do you have a time? And that would be Ukrainian entrepreneur who is in the valley. While he's still in the valley, he still has most of employees here. So it's Ukrainian startups that open physical office in the US, have few people there. They're still making most of the revenues and their business in the States, but keep employees here in Ukraine. This is our typical company from our portfolio would look like. So, it's funny. So Zeev had very concrete proposal to Ukraine, which would be 10 funds, if 50 million each. In Ukraine, there are very few funds that have capital size 50 million or more. It's a very concrete proposal I deeply believe in. And let's just look at few fundamentals. Where else in the world you can find a place with so many A, engineers, B, number of startups, early stage startups, C, like limited access to capital, so the whole venture capital market, it's still very early days, so it's probably in the number in Israel, 25 years ago, even though we have, much larger population. And fourth, so globally minded population, and just to complement my colleagues, like, I want just to add that most of software engineers and people from the industry are fluent in English. they had international exposure, so they know how the business is done internationally, they have the exposure culturally, language-wise, etc. So there is no more place in the world, it's just Ukraine, and probably a few neighboring countries, that's it. So for me, it was no-brainer to start the firm that's gonna be mostly investing in Ukrainian startups going global. And when everybody asks, oh, there is crisis going on and on, so what do you plan to do? I said, look, for next 10 years, I want to continue doing what I'm doing for the last 4.5 years, which is invest in Ukrainian startups going global. That's it. If you're interested to speak more, I'll be around for the next couple hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Yevgen. I think I'm enjoying seeing your enthusiasm so much that I'm gonna probably follow in your footsteps as well and focus on venture. I would like to ask good dear friend and advisor Ilya Ponomarev, who is a Russian politician, the only member of the State Duma to vote against the annexation of Crimea. So that's why luckily he's here with us, and also heavily involved in Skolkovo.
Thank you very much, but I'm not speaking on the capacity of a Russian politician. I would rather speak in the capacity of a person who was very much involved in formation of Russian innovation ecosystem, which was until the annexation of Crimea developing very nicely, and after that very much collapsed, which creates a great opportunity for Ukraine, I think. But we learned quite a number of different things by doing what we were doing. And I would start from where Eugene has stopped, and the proposal of Zeev about the funds and everything. Russia was pretty early among our countries in allocating significant funding for venture capital industry. And we made pretty thorough research of different initiatives that were in different countries, in the US and in Israel and in Southeast Asia and in Finland and in other ecosystems. And the result was the formation of different what we called institutes of development, including so-called Russia Venture Company, which was fund of funds to facilitate formation of venture capital industry in Russia. And at the time Russia Venture Company was established, it was 2007, if I'm not mistaken. We put 500 million into RVC. And the mandate of RVC was to fund half of the committed capital on Russian market. And the result was that the first CEO of Russia Venture Company was sent to jail within a year of the establishment of RVC. And the reason was because he couldn't allocate the money. And then it was replaced by a current CEO, Igor Gamerzian, who was coming from Microsoft. And Igor basically had to radically revise the strategy of RVC and refocus RVC, because RVC was established by law, so he cannot change this 50-50 ratio, and he cannot change the mandate from being fund of funds. But RVC first years invested not into actual venture funds, which were investing in the companies, but they were investing in the infrastructure vehicles, like incubators, like different networking initiatives, like marketing support initiatives, in facilitating IP protection, this kind of things. They even established what is called infrastructure fund, which was funding this kind of industry support initiatives, and that paid off very nicely. after 3-4 years of working of those infrastructure development initiatives, Russian venture market started to pick up, and then they started investing, co-finance actual venture funds. And in 2013, the best year for Russia, the last year before the annexation of Crimea, Russia became number 4 world's venture capital market after US, Israel, and China. We surpassed 1 billion mark of investments. We became the largest venture capital market in Europe. We surpassed UK and Germany in these regards, and France. And we were so targeting to become number 3 market, and of course Israel was our next objective. Unfortunately, politics changed everything, and in 2014, virtually all private investors left. Major investors and like really private investors left Russian market. We still have several hundred million of investments, but it's all done with vehicles that are affiliated with the state. And of course, that's not a real venture capital market. And virtually all the companies that were invested within a year, basically after the annexation of Crimea, relocated to Silicon Valley or to Boston. They pretend to be in Russia formally to keep being funded by the state, but generally their headquarters are elsewhere. Coming to Ukraine, I see that unfortunately we see a lot of mistakes that we were doing in Russia being repeated here. And generally the pattern for the talent market is following Russia's example, because it's not only about being pro-Western or not pro-Western, open or closed. It's also a lot about living standards, about the safety, it's about the stability, it's about the living comfort for engineering people, for entrepreneurs. And here, unfortunately, both Russia and Ukraine cannot offer very advantage conditions, and I think that is one of the things that Ukraine really needs to focus at, because the brain drain virtually the same in percentage-wise from Russia and from Ukraine right now. And we see that, for example, in Belarus, the country which has absolutely undemocratic regime and not very much of openness. They are developing very nicely in terms of their ecosystem, because their political system is stable, their tax system is stable, everything is predictable, and this is something which Ukraine really lacks. Second thing which is extremely important is about how to actually overcome what everybody here was speaking, and I can sign under this very dynamic and robust services market, which from one side is definitely an advantage, from another side is a problem. Ukraine has a lot of experience, has a lot of engineering talent, but it's totally occupied within this industry where they have stable returns, but it's a low technology market. Ukraine definitely lacks experience in terms of products, and internal market is insufficient to pick up. And again, here I think that the current situation with the war and with the Russia aggression presents an opportunity. Firstly, because there is a whole set of applications that is needed right now for Ukraine national security, and it's mainly in the industries where Ukraine is traditionally strong, is in the security space, cybersecurity, physical security, aerospace. All of that is in a high demand. From other side, we see companies that leave Russia, and many of them can be hosted here in Ukraine, enjoy the same low rates, but work on Russian market from Ukraine and for outside markets from Ukraine. And here the whole range of possibilities in fintech, in mobile applications, as well as in a very promising Ukrainian market of agriculture, where a lot of technology-intensive applications, both biotechnologies and management technologies, IT solutions, are needed. To conclude, I think that I see that in the current government there is a notion to put high technologies in the spotlight, and I see different initiatives which are brewing up, so far pretty silently, but I think that we will see in the fall significant advances in terms of government approach to the industry, and I highly urge everybody sitting in this audience to participate in those technologies. Because of course, you know, when we are looking at the advanced markets like US or Israel, it's very tempting to say that it's all work created in a grassroots way, that it's all entrepreneurs who has created this, but it's not the case. Not a single innovation ecosystem in the world, including Silicon Valley, has been created in a grassroots fashion. All of those examples were created by the government, driven by the government, and first at least a decade of development was totally dominated by the government. So by making Ukrainian government reasonable, focused and efficient, we can do a lot of good for our industry. And without this, we will be doomed for a very long and painful startup process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilya. Thanks greatly for all the things you're doing that you have mentioned and all those that will soon be a surprise, I hope, for a positive surprise for the ecosystem. Last but definitely not least, partner of Sanko Herenko, a leading and most reputable law firm in Kiev. Nazar Chernyavsky can now let you guys know about the legal bits and pieces about investing in IT.
Hello, everyone. I will try to be concise, not to keep you long here. And because initially I planned to describe some latest trends in the regulation or deregulation of the technology sector in Ukraine. But now I believe, especially in light of the previous speeches, just to cover the general situation, or like how this sector should be approached when you plan to like enter this market in Ukraine. Basically, any issue has several angles it can be looked at, and usually like many investors are quite scared by Ukrainian restrictive legislation or regulations, and for some of them it is actually a reason why they tend to wait or tend not to enter the market. At the same time, I would say that Ukrainian jurisdiction is quite a peculiar one, because on one hand you have a number of regulations, but on the other hand there is probably the same number of gaps in the regulation, and that can be used both ways. And basically it all depends how interested and determined is the investor. So basically, if let's say we had a number of examples in the past when some investors planned starting some new business or launching some new product, especially in the technology sector, or like as we work a lot in the financial sector, like it is usually some sort of fintech solution, and they would ask, like, can we do this in Ukraine? And if you look from a very formalistic perspective, then the answer would be no, you cannot do this because Ukrainian laws do not provide for this. But at the same time, if you look from the practical perspective and try to understand what they're trying to achieve with it, then most likely you would come up with some solution how that result can be achieved even within the existing regulation. Moreover, I have to say that like in the recent years, like when we had the new government, basically there is a good momentum in the country, in the society for any like legislation changes, especially if they are related to some sort of innovations. And for that reason, it is sufficient to deliver the message from the investor that we want to do something innovative here, which would actually result in better integration of Ukraine with the rest of the Europe and with the rest of the world, and which would improve its positions outside. And then you would definitely find some support, and we can see it from the side of a number of regulators. And first of all, I would like to mention probably the National Bank, because it has historically been the most regulated area in Ukraine when it comes to any technologies. And obviously the main barrier is the Ukrainian currency control regulations, and they are still in place, like all those restrictions, but at the same time we see that gradually the National Bank, obviously under some pressure from the international institutions, is loosening those restrictions, and it is becoming more and more susceptible to any new technologies. And if we take Ukrainian banks, it is not that easy for them to implement any solutions, even though we still see some of the banks who are very advanced and who have their own in-house development teams and who have extremely advanced products which you would not even see somewhere in Europe. So maybe you can see some of that in the US, although the banking sector there is as well regulated as in Ukraine. But if you have an outside company who wants to start some product in Ukraine and basically would be doing it from abroad, so that's why it does not fall strictly under the regulation of Ukrainian laws, they can still benefit like from all these positive factors they have. First of all, the talent we have here, because obviously a number of software engineers can develop amazing things which are really advanced even by international standards. And then you have a very good testing ground, because as I mentioned at the very beginning, a lot of areas are not regulated at all. And that is why it can also be used to see how that or this technology works here. And finally, you can then easily expand it to other markets after you see how it works. And basically, Ukraine is a very good ground for that. Just to summarize the overall position, because we are quite heavily involved in the IT sector, in the IT community, and what we usually hear from the like representatives of this community when it comes to their relationships with the state. So they often say, and I believe that many of the people present here may confirm this, that we do not need like any benefits or any help, just give us enough freedom so that we can develop ourselves, and we basically just leave us alone and the market will develop. And in my view, what can be done by the state, and that was actually touched upon briefly during the previous panel, like on education, is that our state just needs to help with creating a proper basically proper views on the entrepreneurial culture. So basically, in educational establishments, we need to plant these ideas in our children, so that when they grow, when they start working, especially in this area, they would not be seduced by all these outsourcing companies, so that they actually do not have their own ideas. They can just do quality work for someone who is located outside, but they actually start generating our own products. And that's why I'm like very grateful to all funds, and we are also like involved in that activity, who stimulate own products in Ukraine and who support those teams and those startups who use their talent to generate something like for the benefit, like for their own benefit, and ultimately for the benefit of our country, because I believe that it all helps to the overall development of the state and of the overall infrastructure, basically environment.
Thank you. Everyone, thank you very much. We had, I think, quite an eclectic panel discussion. Fortunately, we had so much fun that there's no time for questions. All questions should be directed probably once we get off the stage.